the beginning of week 6. So how are you doing? Welcome to the last week. There's a few things I want to cover about the ethics essay and specifically the research essay and how the two of them are related. The reason we did the ethics essay is I wanted you to have experience using an interpretive lens to look at a subject. Interpretive lenses are great because not only do they guide our research in a particular area. If you're looking at ethics, for instance, you're not going to be looking at business. No, that's not right. Welcome to our last week. There's some things I want to talk to you about. Welcome to our last week. There's some things I want to talk about the ethics essay and the research essay. The ethics essay, first and foremost, it was an exercise in using interpretive lenses to grab some insight into your subjects. When we're looking at ethics, that's the primary thing we're looking at. It helps eliminate a bunch of other things we don't necessarily need to pay attention to, although they might inform our argument. In other words, a critical lens not only helps us filter our subject into a particular discipline. You look at stuff that's about business in a much different way than you look at stuff that's about theater. But it also helps us define our subject and stop us from going all over the place. Now, one of the things about the ethics essay, I got a number of people who did not specifically engage the language of ethics. They didn't talk about rights, responsibilities, obligations, and duties. And if you're one of those people, keep in mind, I've expanded the revision for that last essay up to Wednesday as long as you talk to me on Monday or Tuesday. Set up an appointment via Remind. But the way this relates to the research paper is, while the ethics paper has that specific focus, the research paper does not, which means it's up to you to apply that specific focus to the research paper. Let's face it, with the research paper, you have freedom to do anything you want, but that also means that it's your responsibility to figure out what you're writing about, because you can't write about everything. We just don't have the space. And when we went over that sample essay, Animal Rights, the main thing I wanted you to get out of that is if you have a very narrow and specific focus, not only is it easier for us readers, because us readers like a specific focus and a specific subject because we can keep it in our mind a lot better. It's easier for us to follow your argument. But it's also better for you as a writer because it helps define the terms of your argument a lot more and makes it easier to write. A specific subject will always be easier to write than a big, broad, and general one. Trust me, I wrote encyclopedia articles in the past, and those things are not easy and not fun to write because you're spending most of your time trying to figure out what fits, what doesn't. If you have a defined subject, you don't have to worry about those things as much. Now, this means you need to think of ways to define your subject for the research essay. And there's two possible approaches I want to suggest to you. Once, the ethics essay was in putting an interpretive lens onto your subject to help narrow and define it. And you can and you should put an interpretive lens on your research paper. Let's pick a subject. Say if you're writing a paper about professional wrestling. There's a lot of ways you can look at professional wrestling. If you want to look at it from a business point of view, you're going to get a much different type of argument than you would if you look at it from any other point of view. Why? Because the way professional wrestling is set up, you have a corporation who runs it and a bunch of independent contractors. And there's a lot of reasons for why they do that. But one of them is that companies don't have to treat independent contractors the same as they would treat full-time employees. Different legal requirements, different requirements in terms of benefits and other things like that. it allows them to push a lot of that standard employee-employer responsibility onto the employees themselves, which is the same reason Uber does it that way, and Lyft does it that way, and any number of other things. If I wanted to look at professional wrestling in a completely different manner, I could look at it from, say, theater. Professional wrestling's theater, right? You're presenting yourself to large amounts of people, and the way you interact from a performer standpoint to the audience has a lot to do with how actors in theater respond to their audiences. If we wanted to look at it from a narrative point of view, wrestling has storylines. We all know this. Are they the normal expected storylines of a movie? No, it's closer to what soap operas do, which is closer to what melodrama did, which means you have incidences which build upon each other but never really come to an ultimate conclusion. Do soap operas come to an ultimate conclusion? No, the story just keeps going on and on. You keep getting twists and turns, and that's what happens in wrestling. Good guy gets ambushed by bad guy. They get angry with each other, so they fight, and they have the big fight at the pay-per-view, and the good guy wins. Does that mean the bad guy goes away? No, he gets his friends and then ambushes the good guy and beats them up, and then they have a big rematch at the next one, and so on and so forth and so on. If we wanted to look at professional wrestling from a different point of view, say the audiences. Everybody knows professional wrestling is scripted. The companies that produce professional wrestling haven't really made that much of a mystery. It's common knowledge and has been for quite some time. Since the 80s, really, is when they started being quite open about that. So why do people go to professional wrestling? Why do they watch it? You can't really find that out by sitting and watching it on television. You have to go talk to the people who actually go watch it, which is what an anthropologist would do. So the critical lens is important because it really shapes the kind of analysis you're going to get out of it, but it provides you, as a writer, a way to narrow your focus. Narrow focuses are good. Remember, readers can deal with narrow and specific a lot better than they can deal with big, broad, and general. If you're still thinking that you're writing too big, broad, and general, and hopefully you're looking for ways to narrow down your subject, narrow subjects, easier to write. One way is to just go out and do research and look for someone who says something you disagree with, and then your entire essay can be this person is wrong in this way, this way, this way, and this way. And that will give you a specific subject to focus on. You're writing a longer paper for the research paper, but let's face it, it's not that much longer. It's a 6-page minimum paper as opposed to the 4-page minimum paper you just wrote. So you still can't write a book's worth of stuff. You have to look for ways to take large subjects and boil them down to something you can effectively do in the space. Critical approach is one of those ways. Looking at the literature and arguing against something is one of those ways. You can and you should look at a specific element of your subject rather than trying to do the entire subject. If I tried to do every element of professional wrestling, that would be over a book. If I tried to do every single element of professional wrestling narrative, that would be over a book. So since we only have 6+ pages, you got to come up with a much more narrow scope. So this is one of the things I want you to keep thinking about as you work on the research essay. Now, in terms of the research essay, it's going to be due Friday. All of our work's due Friday. On Thursday, I'm going to upload a video which goes over how we're going to proceed with the end of the class since this is the last week, so keep an eye on that. Meanwhile, get your Wednesday work caught up. If you want to revise your ethics essay, get a hold of me via Remind. Give me some possible appointment times for Monday or Tuesday. If you have any questions, Remind again is going to be the best way you can get a hold of me. I'll get to that as soon as I can. And that's most of what I got for right now. So, get your Wednesday work done. work on your research paper. It's the biggest part of your grades. You're going to want to make sure you do it right. And if you have questions, I'm here to help. Let me know. See you next time.